Well, today we're going to start a new journey together through Mandukya Upanishad. As you know, we have several core texts. We have 4 categories of texts that we go through. We go through a lot with Yoga Sutras. We go through Bhagavad Gita. We go through Upanishads. And we go through Tripura Rahasya in the Tantra piece. Hi, Nellie. And hi, Jeff. And I just want to make a couple comments first. When I hear from a person, whether directly in a face-to-face conversation or in an email message or a Facebook message, it's very common that there's something that says, essentially, I want to start meditating. What do I do? Well, in a typed little message like this, it's extremely difficult. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Meridel. Hi, Rosalind. It's difficult, to say the least, if not impossible, to give somebody in a few sentences or a couple paragraphs instructions on how do I meditate. Most of us have spent many years working with this, and so you just simply cannot do it that quickly. So the spirit of it is we have put out Udemy courses, and we keep going through all of these texts over and over. We use these as talking points, so that leads to other conversations. And then if we cover this material, these principles and practices in this kind of way, hi, Johnny, if we cover it in this kind of way, it forms a foundation so that then, hi, Urban, there can then be an individual personal conversation that is more fruitful. Anyway, that's the spirit of it. And so what I want to start is going through today. It'll take us a couple of weeks to go through this all, is the discussion by Swami Rama on Mandukya Upanishad. The Upanishad, hello Hashim, the Upanishad itself is only 12 verses. The entire subject of this Upanishad is Om mantra. That does not just mean sitting around chanting Om. It means knowing the meaning of what it symbolizes, which Patanjali says in Yoga Sutras. He says you do the Om, but you do it with an awareness of the meaning. This is what we're going through. And in this text, I was tempted today. Here's our friend Swami Rama. This is the old original version of it, of Enlightenment Without God. And I was tempted to just start with verse 1 and go through only the portions of this that are directly on the 12 verses. But the introduction part of this thing is superb. It's about 25 pages. So I thought, no, I just cannot. Hi, Ma. I cannot hi, Inika. I just cannot resist going through some of this as well. And this time through, I thought I would do this with you in the kind of gentle way. So you can just sit back on the couch, put your head on a pillow, and take it in. And so this is like a bedtime story, rather than having it with the screen sharing and us all thinking, oh, this is so important. I have to look on the screen and see every word as it goes by and that kind of thing. And in case you forgot who I am, let me put that there. I want to read to you the preface of this book. It's short. It's about 1 page long, but there's a particular reason for it, and that is because, the publisher's note. And it's about 1 page. It's because of the name of the person on the publisher's note. I'll tell you that. I'll just read this to you and then make the comment. This book is highly provocative and can inspire us to start thinking beyond our accustomed patterns. Diverse are the ways, but the goal is one and the same. Peace, happiness, and bliss are the prerequisites for attaining ultimate truth, capital U and T. This book, Ultimate Truth, this book will be useful for those who have been seeking and are still unfulfilled. They can reevaluate, Somebody's at the door. Give me a minute here. I don't know what that's about. Hello. Hi. Yes. I don't know why I had that locked. Just have it from morning, I guess. This book will be useful for those who have been seeking and are still. You can close that if you want. If you want to go in and close, you can close both doors if you want, and it'll have quiet. This book will be useful for those who have been seeking and are still unfulfilled. They can reevaluate their thinking process and the way they intellectualize by understanding the two separate methods systematically described within: the meditative way of having intuitive knowledge and the way of contemplation for attaining the supreme state of consciousness, meditation and contemplation. In fact, Swami Rama does not condemn God or the great messengers of truth, but he is independent in his thinking that enlightenment can be attained without the help of religion or the concept of God. According to him, enlightenment means a state free from all pains, miseries, and ignorance. He terms ultimate truth as supreme consciousness and calls it beyond all the states of human consciousness. At the same time, he says that this fourth state, which is beyond waking, dreaming, and sleeping, is attainable here and now. I am sure, listen to this paragraph, I am sure this book will help the aspirant, but at the same time, it might annoy some who are not prepared to listen to independent ideas. Hi, Leela. But when we carefully read the whole book, we can come to the conclusion that enlightenment is possible through self-discipline and self-realization. Whether it can be attained without God, I do not know. The man who wrote that, I saw this, I looked at this thing, I sort of thought this was caught my attention for several years. And finally, one day I saw him and I asked him, I have a question for you about this book. And it's about the last sentence of this comment where you said, whether it can be attained without God, I do not know. I said, I want to know more about that sentence. Why did you write that there? There was a part of me that wondered, how did the editors and all allow a comment like that to come through? Think about it. Whether it can be attained without God, I do not know. And his explanation back to me, this is the fun part, his explanation back to me was, well, that actually came from a ghost writer. You know the term ghost writer, where somebody who's not the author puts words in or puts the idea in. And so he explained it to me. It was a suggestion request of Swami Rama because of recognizing the cultures of our world, the dominant cultures of our world have a concept of God that now this now is me speaking. I'm speaking to you in terms of my understanding of what happened and where Swami Rama was coming from and why he wanted this kind of comment in the book. He's titling the book Enlightenment Without God. Well, how do you put something in there to address this issue of the word God? In our dominant cultures of the world, the word God is conceived to be as a being, usually called a him, and he is somewhere that is out there. This seems to be the dominant kind of way in which the word God is used. But there is another way in which this word God is used, and it is seldom talked about. And that is that God is a word that is used to denote, if I say the word pen, that denotes a certain object called this. This is a pen. And so what does the word God denote? And again, I mean, think about this, and I think we all know this. I think we all know this, that the word God usually refers to a him who is somewhere and who is the creator or overseer or boss or something of me and all of us. He's there and we are here. The other way in which this word God gets used is as if God is not limited by being merely over there in contrast to over here, but the word God being used to denote, to symbolize the infinite one, non-dual reality. I know you're familiar with that language. And so that's the spirit of it. And so putting this question in here, can it be done without the version of the word God called him? That is a being over there. That's the spirit of it. And I find it, as I sat with this, I realized it's kind of got a rather deep sense of humor in it. So enlightenment without God. Now, again, this is me making comment here on this title, because I saw this title, and I first saw this, thought, wow, what is this? And so you're entitling the book Without God. It means enlightenment without that version, without that face, without that definition of God as a being who is over there and I am over here. And that's what this whole orientation is about. The very notion of yoga says, old metaphor, says, I am like a wave that is in the ocean of infinite consciousness. One of we call an infinite ocean of consciousness in that metaphor. Well, it's sort of obvious when you go sit at the ocean and look at a wave, literally look at a wave. It's easy to see the wave as an individual. And then you blink your eyes and you look at it another way, and you realize, wow, I'm looking at the entire ocean. Well, one of the usages of the word God is for that infinite ocean. And if you're holding it in that kind of yogic way, then it is obvious that the wave is one with the ocean. And qualitatively, there's no difference between a wave and an ocean. Yet, if you are a surfer, just for example, a body surfer or an on-the-board surfer, you are surfing on a wave. A good surfer sits out there on their board and is waiting for a really good wave to come by. He knows he's in the ocean, but is waiting for an individual wave. Anyway, not to beat the metaphor to death, but that's the source of this thing here. Whether it can be attained without God, I do not know. And so he explained to me that's why that was there. And it was a delightful conversation and very insightful to hear like that. Anyway, I hope that was a fun story for you. Hi, Scott. And I just can't resist. I was tempted, like I said, to skip over the front matter in the introduction to this, but it's got some really good stuff in it. So just take it in, and you don't have to sit there and stare at me smiling back at you and talking at you. Kick back and enjoy. This first part is called Awakening, and there's some delightful sections in here. The Vedas are the most ancient scriptures in the library of man today. For ages, their knowledge has been imparted through the oral tradition. There were no printing presses way back when. There was no paper as we know it today, and there were no printing presses. There was a period in there where early on, apparently from what is known, it was totally oral, and then they started finding ways to use the ink quality of some plants and started writing on tree bark. I don't remember the name of it, but there's a particular kind of tree that the bark peels off in sheets that are about the size of a page of this book, and they would write on it. So This writing stuff has evolved over a very long period of time. And the early yogis supposedly had intuited this kind of wisdom, but they certainly didn't have internet. They didn't have Facebook Live and Be Live like we're using this technology. This is really neat. We get to do something like this at a distance. And so anyway, it was mostly oral tradition. It was exclusively oral tradition. And still, as most of you know, the richest stuff happens in conversation. And so the oral tradition has not disappeared. It's what you and I are living constantly. This is a version of this. I know it's a little one-sided because I'm doing the talking and you're doing the listening, and you can use the comment box. But then when you and I have a private conversation, it's purely oral. And you know this. I think we all know this, that it's when sometimes with some person, you have a conversation, that's where we end up with the clarity. And you go, aha, wow, I never understood that. And now finally that makes sense. Thank you, we say to the other person. And so it's still oral. We're still human beings and we communicate with another. Written words are very useful, but it's still oral. No author has ever been attributed to these scriptures. Some people in the world are critical of yoga traditions because there is no one person founder. Who is your Buddha? Who is your Christ? And when you're Jesus, and who is your Muhammad? Who is your one person? When the Western people invaded the region of the world that we now know as India, it used to be kingdoms, not a unified country. They cast the net out and they looked at what the people were doing there, and they asked the question. You can research the history of religion if you're curious. It's fascinating. And they naturally looked for what is their version of religion. So borrowing upon their own version of religion from Europe, they said, where is their Bible and who is their God? So when they ran into something called Bhagavad Gita, they said, the name of their God is Krishna. And it's, of course, a false God. But because these people are deluded, they've never actually heard of the real one and only God. So they think the name of God is Krishna. And the name of their Bible is Bhagavad Gita or Vedas. That's the name of their Bibles. Anyway, no author has ever been attributed to these scriptures. There is no author. There is no single author of any of these Upanishads or these ancient texts. Supposedly, Vyasa wrote the Bhagavad Gita, but Vyasa is the name of a lineage. It's like saying Harvard University you see a thing that says Harvard published on so-and-so. It's not the name of a man. There was a Mr. Harvard 300, 400, 500 years ago. There was an original Mr. Harvard, but that got, people don't know that along the way, so we're not referring to him. It's that university. Well, that was the word Vyasa. So Vyasa was not an individual person, was a lineage name. Same with Patanjali. Anyway, let me not get too far off track here. No author has ever been attributed to these scriptures. The eternal laws of life in the universe expressed in these scriptures were revealed to seers and sages who devoted their entire lives to the realization of ultimate truth. These seers received this knowledge not through sense perception or the mind, meaning not intellectual thinking, but through inner vision or inner wisdom, directly from the source of intuition during the deepest states of contemplation and meditation. And deepest source of intuition does not mean, again, that man in the sky version of the word God. Other levels of knowledge give only a partial glimpse. But intuitive knowledge is self-evident and complete. It is the highest of all knowledge. I want to pause here for a moment to say, as we're going through this, please don't take this in as a belief system. This, Swami Rama, this tradition, these people, and Swami Rama writes this in this book. Therefore, this is the gospel. This is the truth. This is the religion I follow. Please don't think that that's what we're doing. Take this in. Literally, just sit back, kick back, and take this in as we take this journey together, and you decide for yourself which sentence, which principle makes sense to you, and if it makes sense to you, internalize it and let it be your own. And then you are able to say to yourself, which is most important, and to another person, not in an argument, but if you're having a conversation with a person, where are you coming from? What do you believe? How do you see the world? Then you own it. Then it's your perspective. You don't have to sit there and constantly keep quoting, well, it came from a tradition I'm involved with and a man named Swami Rama, and he invented all this stuff. That's exactly the point, that this is not that kind of thing. So just take it in, and then then you can own it, and it's your own. Only you don't possess it, right? Hi, Nellie. It is the highest of all knowledge. Such knowledge derived from the center of consciousness through intuition is called Shruti. Shruti means that which is heard by the innermost ear of the sages and seers when in the deepest state of contemplation. And note here that this word heard is sort of a grammatical, poetic, or something like that style of language. It does not mean literally they were sitting there hallucinating, hearing voices. Kicking back and hearing, says Rosalind. Good, 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 good. I'll put that up there. I like that. Kicking back and hearing. Kicking back and take it in. Shruti means that which is heard by the innermost ear of the sages and seers when in the deepest state of contemplation. It is used to refer to the verses of the Vedas and the Upanishads. What we're about to embark on is Mandukya Upanishad. And the same principle applies to when somebody else is giving a description of that or commentary. There are two channels of knowledge, direct and indirect. Direct knowledge is transcendent, para, P-A-R-A, para. It is self-evident and experienced from the ultimate source. Indirect knowledge is sensory or mental, apara. So most of what we are doing in our daily lives with our thinking, even as good as is apara vidya. This is me speaking, apara vidya. Para vidya means the direct experience that we know from within. Apara vidya is thought out knowledge. Apara, it is knowledge from the external world, or the knowledge gained through waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. It is perceived by the intellect through the senses and mind, and thus is conditioned by time, space, and causation. Saying that is so does not make it bad. It does not make it wrong. It's a very good way of having knowledge, but it's useful to discern between paravidya and aparavidya. Direct knowledge is not perceived through the senses and mind because it is the knowledge of the absolute reality, turiya. So when we talk about pratyahara, the withdrawal of the senses and things like that, we're doing that so that we can get paravidya, the knowledge directly from within, and not gaining that knowledge through the senses. There's nothing wrong with having senses. There's nothing wrong with having a mind. There's nothing wrong with having intelligence. They work beautifully out here if we are willing to use them out here. Look at the problems we have in our communities in our world today. Some of that does not appear to be the product of very good thinking. Direct knowledge is not perceived through the senses and mind because it is the knowledge of the absolute reality, turiya. It is neither object nor subject, but is pure experience of the self by the self. When it says not object or subject, I'm the subject, the pen is the object. I know about the pen because I'm the observer observing the pen. That's the difference between subject-object. The subject-object relationship is the way it's philosophically talked about often. It means I'm the subject and this is the object. Where am I? It is neither subject, but it is neither object nor subject, but is pure experience of the self by the self. prior to that subject-object relationship way of knowing, which is what we do out here. And most of our internal thinking, when we say, I'm thinking about this, or I'm thinking about this Upanishad, unfortunately, most of that is subject-object relationship. In a sense, that's what we're doing with this book right now with these words. We're doing subject-object relationship. So we say then, why are we waste our time doing this? Because, to borrow a comment from Swami Rama, we need to learn how to unlearn. We have a habit of learning only through subject-object relationship and thinking in this external surface-most level of mind. But we have to start where we are. So we hang out with this in the sense of subject-object relationship. Why? So that when, as borrowing what Rosalind says, kicking back and hearing, when we do that, the hope is that as you lean back on your couch and you almost fall asleep while you're thinking about this stuff we're doing, that there's a moment where you go beyond your own thinking process. We all know this. We call it in common language intuition. And your head's on the pillow on the couch and you're taking it in, and it's subject-object relationship. And all of a sudden something goes flash in you, and you look up with a startle from your pillow on your couch, and you suddenly have an insight and you say, wow, and you reach over and you grab a book or a pen and paper and you write down some little phrase to yourself, and suddenly you have an insight that you didn't have before. And that insight did not come from the subject-object relationship. So experiences in the three states, those outside of Turiya, are not knowledge. That is correct, Rosalind. It's shocking to think of it that way, but that's the idea. It is lower knowledge. It is apara vidya. It is not para vidya. It is not direct knowing. It's indirect knowing. But even at that, notice what I just said, and what we're just realizing here is that the wisdom, that the universal wisdom or knowing that is in Turiya can sort of leak through, and we can get a glimpse of it. It's not saying that the three states are bad. There's nothing wrong with waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. They're not bad things to get rid of, but to recognize that the real knowing is coming from beyond that. And so gradually, Nellie says an Om. Okay, got it then, huh? Insight and intuition can rise through those states, yes. And then you and I experience it with our intelligence, but we did not merely sit down and intellectually think our way through it. It came forward from that. And this is the nature of the contemplation. We read that part where in the preface there that contrasted meditation and contemplation. Now, that's not new information for any of us in this conversation. We know meditation and contemplation, we do them both. Anyway, so good. When this knowledge is not knowledge through the mind, or meaning by virtue of the mind, but through vision revealed in the deepest state of realization. Whenever direct knowledge is imparted by an enlightened sage to a student, the student comprehends the knowledge through his intellect. That's what we're doing right now. We're having a conversation and we're using our intellect. Nothing wrong with that. Such knowledge is considered to be indirect knowledge. The only way to attain direct knowledge is through meditation and contemplation, which lead one to the infinite library of eternal wisdom. Transcendental knowledge can be attained only directly from within, and the Upanishads provide methods and means for going to that source. Now, when we do that within part and we have this aha, hi, Nicholas, hola, and we have that occur, notice that what can happen then is you may have this insight and something goes click within and you say, wow, these rishis, these yogis who wrote this shit, they really knew what they were talking about. Wow, they're right. What they said in words matches my own inner direct experience. And this is a very, very good thing. Now, we may not be in the state of realization. We may not be Krishna or Christ or Buddha, but it's coming forward from the Turiya, from that place, and it is transcendental knowledge, and we know it. And this is a very, very good thing. And it provides the stimulus for us to keep going with our meditation and contemplation, looking forward to the time where it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and we have, for a period of time, transcended our own mind. And then this stuff really starts flowing and making sense. The only way to attain direct knowledge is through meditation and contemplation, which lead one to the infinite library of eternal wisdom. Transcendental knowledge can be attained only directly from within, and the Upanishads provide methods and means for going to that source. That's why we're hanging out with this stuff over and over and over again. Why do we not just hear it one time and go do it? Because we have a pretty thick cloud bank over us, every one of us. And there's nothing wrong with that. That cloud bank of ignorance or avidya is what allows us to be individual people out here functioning in the world. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But in doing that, we have forgotten our true nature. That's not a new sentence for you either, is it? Cloudy mind. Yes, clouded mind. Oh, my, my, my. I love that phrase, and it's clear. The goal of the Upanishads, which is one of which we're looking at now, is to lead the aspirant to the realization of comprehensive knowledge of waking, dreaming, and sleeping, and finally to establish himself in the fourth state, Turiya. Note that there's a break in there where it says, and finally to. So there's two parts in there. One is the comprehensive knowledge of waking, dreaming, and sleeping. Through our practices of meditation and contemplation, which we are able to do because we hang out together and we keep talking about this stuff, through the doing of that, we gradually become aware of the meaning of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. We become aware of the active unconscious and the latent unconscious and the conscious mind and all of these things here. And more, this happens all the time from those of you who are sincerely practice. All of a sudden I'll get a note and says, wow, or a conversation. I had this tremendous experience. I was suddenly aware of, I was actually laying in bed sleeping, and suddenly I was aware of being asleep. And that wasn't there before. It's a new insight. This is how we experience this comprehensive knowledge. We start having what is in modern terms often called lucid dreaming. We become more aware of what's going on inside of a dream. And we start to realize, wait a minute, this conscious behavior that I'm doing out here, and these action, speech, and thought that I'm doing out here in the world, every one of those has its root in an unconscious process. And behind, so to speak, that unconscious process, I infer or intuit that there is consciousness itself. So this is the kind of stuff that we're living it. And this is approximately the meaning of the realization of comprehensive knowledge of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. And then finally, it says finally to establish in the fourth state, Turiya, means it does not happen immediately. So in the meantime, the inference of this fourth state of the pure consciousness, the inference of that evermore comes forward to us in our waking state. So we have a nice meditation one day and we get up from our seat and we say, wow, that was really cool. I think this stuff that these yogis are telling me is actually accurate. And so it's a good thing. The finest section of the Vedas is comprised of the Upanishadic literature, which is generally known as Vedanta. The word Upanishad literally means to sit and listen to the preceptor who has attained Brahman consciousness and is fully enlightened. Now, in some sense, we're not doing exactly that, but in some sense, that's what we're doing right now. We're having a conversation. I'm doing some talking, but I'm reading this to you. So Swami Rama is talking to us, and the rishis and yogis of old are talking to us, and there's a conversation going on. We're sitting and we're listening. And this word listen, the original word of that is shravana. In contemplation, there's four major stages: shravana, manana, nididhyasana, and sakshatkara. If you want to know more about that, go to the course on Jnana Yoga Contemplation, the Yoga of Contemplation. It's one of our Udemy courses. And I think we tried, I was going to say we think, but we tried to do a good job of putting that together in an understandable way. But this word Shravana literally translates as listen. Why listen? Because this is the way it was done before there were books and printing presses and internet and all this sort of stuff. The only thing that could be done is two people were sitting around together, a little group of people, and one of them's the old man that's done this stuff and knows something, and the other people are listening. The key of this word listening, the intent behind it is taking it in. I asked you when we started this today, just kick back and take it in. So that's Shravana. It's taking it in. And then what you have to do is internalize it and ponder it. There's no escaping that. Each of us has to ponder this stuff ourselves. Very often somebody says, can I do my meditation laying down? No, do your meditation sitting up, because when you're laying down, you have a habit of falling asleep. But when you lay down gradually, you can train yourself to not fall asleep. And that's a beautiful place. You have a nice, comfortable couch. Get on the couch, sit on the couch, lay down on the couch, put your head on the pillow, and do contemplation. That's a good place to ponder this stuff, to think about it, to just ponder about it. But it's not this analytical 1 + 1 = 2 thinking. It's pondering. That's the manana part in that sequence that I just said. The word Upanishad literally means to sit and listen to the preceptor who has attained Brahman consciousness and is fully enlightened. I like to say here, there's an old saying that says, when the student is ready, the teacher will come. I have the great joy of being an assistant. So there's another phrase I playfully say is that sometimes when the student is ready, the teacher will send one of his assistants. And so I call myself an assistant. I'm no Swami Rama, I'm no Krishna, I'm no Patanjali, I'm no Christ, I'm no Buddha. I'm an assistant. And what great joy, what great fun that is. So we hang out and we sit together and we go through this stuff. The Upanishads are written in Sanskrit language, but knowledge of the language alone is not sufficient for comprehending the knowledge of the Upanishads. Very critically important point there. It's very, very easy to think, I need to go off and be a Sanskrit scholar to be able to do this stuff. And it is a tremendously big trap. I've met many people who have got caught in that trap. Swami Rama says it clearly somewhere, and it says the only book you really need to study is the book that you yourself are. We are constructed, as the Bible says, where man is constructed in the image of God. Same architectural blueprint, the same levels of reality that we're talking about here in this journey that we're going through together in this Mandukya Upanishad. We're going to go through the levels of Vaishvanara, Tejasa, Prajna, and Turiya, these 4 levels of consciousness. That's the way the universe operates, and it's the way that you and I individually operate. The word Vedanta literally means the very end or culmination of Vedic knowledge. All the major schools of Indian philosophy and several branches of psychology evolved from this vast storehouse of knowledge. The Upanishads are said to be the epitome of Vedic knowledge and the treasure of the innermost experiences derived by the Vedic sages. There are more than 200 Upanishads, and of them 108 are available to the common reader. Most of the Upanishads have been lost over time. The only way that we know that they exist is because an Upanishad is mentioned in another one, but nobody has a copy of it. There are many commentaries on the Upanishads, but the most ancient ones available are those of Shankara, the most brilliant Vedantic philosopher and architect of Advaita philosophy. And Shankara was with us about on rough order of 1200 years ago was when Shankara was around, and he did a lot to help clarify this stuff. He chose 11 principal Upanishads for his commentaries, and these Upanishads are considered to be the main source of Vedantic philosophy. Although there are many great religious books in the world, the Upanishadic literature has been a principal source of inspiration for the educated and intellectual person or student, for the Upanishads transcends any particular religious orientation. Now, a lot of people don't like that. They don't want to transcend a particular religious orientation. They want to stick only with what they know because mine is right and everybody else is wrong. And I admit my sarcasm in saying it like that. But this is where we are. Transcends that. The interpretation of the nature and definition of truth, which is still a matter of dispute among modern thinkers, has been thoroughly investigated by the ancient sages. Vedanta philosophy is unique, for it sets before itself the prime questions to be solved, and it also provides a method for finding the ultimate truth. This literature unveils the mysteries of life and logically answers the prime questions that other books leave unanswered. These questions include: who am I? From where have I come? Why have I come? Where will I go? The Upanishads also explain the relationship of the individual to other individuals and creatures of the world. And they finally lead one to understand the status of the individual in the universe. The Upanishads help the human mind to realize the actual unity of consciousness dwelling within the apparent diversity of nature. And they declare that there is only one principle, the absolute truth, which is self-existent and not subject to change, death, or decay. One who has realized this truth knows no fear, loves all, and excludes none. Vedanta philosophy is an Adhyatmavada, that which comes under the domain of Atman philosophy. It is an Adhyatmavada philosophy in which every sacrifice is made to attain the center of consciousness, and all other duties occupy a minor position. So there's number one on the list. To be an aspirant with the goal of attaining the truth, capital T, one needs to have certain qualifications, the primary being non-attachment, because without it, the study of scriptures and practice would be impossible. A very, very important point. We have to do the groundwork of recognizing how totally attached we are to the things of the world and to our false identities and all that. If we try to skip over that and merely make an intellectual study of Sanskrit and these texts, we're going to be absolutely lost, and it's not going to have any real outcome. The student of Vedanta is delighted to renounce all material belongings, relationships, and every feeling and thought of worldly possessions for the sake of attaining truth. That's a tough sentence. I'm going to read it again, but I want to say something about it first. This does not mean that we literally have to become homeless and leave our house. It doesn't mean you have to walk instead of using your car. It doesn't mean that you literally renounce those things that they can't be around you. But what we simply must renounce is the deluded notion that these are mine. That's where the trap is. We're sitting in this nice, cute little ashram that we have here and have a house. And so we have some things like that. We have a couple cars, have a bicycle, and we have some stuff around. We have cooking utensils. I'm sitting on a couch. We have couches and furniture, and Zachary is here and sitting on the couch over there looking at me. And so it's nice to have all this stuff. But let us not fall, let Matri not fall into the deluded notion that these are mine. Neither the same with your house and your stuff. We want to cultivate the attitude, we want to live a long, fruitful life and be enlightened and all this kind of stuff, but be ready. I don't want to overstate this, but be a yogi and be prepared to die at any moment. You just don't know when death is going to come. It seems that death happens to everybody else. A grandparent dies. We don't think it's going to happen. The child doesn't think it's going to happen to him, but it does. So cultivate the awareness. This is the non-attachment I'm trying to say more about, is cultivate the awareness, the non-attached perspective, that none of this is mine. That's the spirit of this. And so some will then literally renounce everything and go live in a cave. That's one of the usages of the word renounce. But the other meaning of the word renounce is to renounce the mental notion of ownership. That's the trap. That's the big trap. The student of Vedanta is delighted to renounce all material objects, relationships, renouncing a relationship. The hardest one I can think of is a mother with a baby. But it can be done, and it must be done. It must be the awareness that this child is not my property. And we all know, you go out in the culture, oh, I see you have a new baby there. Oh, yes, this is my daughter. This is my son. And it's built in. We just say my daughter, my son, my family, my. And so, and I say mother because this little baby came out of the body of the mother. She carried it around from a little seed and grew inside. And it's exciting. And of course, the baby is mine in the sense of responsibility to train it and raise it in a healthy way and educate it and take care of it and all those kind of things. It's not acknowledging that, but it's an internal process that says, renounce this relationship. Renounce it and recognize I do not own this human being. And one day this human being will probably be living without a parent anymore because the parent, me, is probably going to die somewhere along the way. So let me train my child well, like this. So renounce the relationship and every feeling and thought of worldly possessions. Renounce the feeling. Note the choice of words. Renounce the feeling and thought of worldly possessions. It doesn't say renounce the possessions. Renounce the feeling of possessions. It's not my ashram. It's not my house. It's not my furniture. It's not mine. We all can do that, can't we? The student of Vedanta is delighted to, is the choice word Swami Rama used, is delighted to renounce all these things. Well, if we are not delighted, if we're hanging out listening to what I'm saying, and you don't feel a sense of delight at being, to borrow Maitri's word, free in Roseanne, if you don't feel the delight of being free of all these encumberments, something's missing. And we can't really do this sadhana. We can't do this sadhana without first having this spirit of renunciation, and it's internal. Anyway, complete non-attachment is the first prerequisite for the student of this path. Unless the student's mind is completely purged of all stains and samskaras that cause attachment, one cannot make one's mind one-pointed and inward. This is one of the reasons that we also spend so much time going not only through these Upanishadic wisdom things, but also through the Yoga Sutras, which in great detail outlines the path of non-attachment and how do we pull that off and how do we examine samskaras. According to Vedanta, there are two definite paths. In one, the aspirant renounces all he has and is attached to, including thoughts, desires, and feelings. This is the path of renunciation, which is meant for a fortunate few. These are the literal renunciation, walk off and live in the cave. Those who are fully awakened can alone follow this path. Means being awakened to these realities we're talking about doesn't mean awakened literally to the direct experience of Turiya. Hola, Jose. In the other path, the aspirant learns to perform his duties without any attachment. Note the choice of word, learns to perform them without attachment. Doesn't say that immediately today we know how to do it and we succeed, but we learn. Renouncing the fruits of his actions so that the actions and fruits therein do not carry any bondage. So, okay, so you make some money and the money comes home to make the mortgage payment, to buy the house so that there is a place for the children to live. give up the fruits. It's not just for me to have more money. He can also attain the ultimate truth, not merely the renunciate that leaves and goes to the cave. Shankara and other great renunciates believed in renouncing all one's possessions literally, but aspirants like Janaka, who was a king, who is often spoken of, a great king in charge of a big kingdom and lots of people, not to support, kingdom government versus democracy and all that, but it was just a reality. And Janaka apparently was a very enlightened dude. He was a cool guy. And so he's not the same as Shankara. Shankara was a renunciate. Janaka was a king, believed in living in the world yet remaining above. The followers of both paths can attain the fourth state Turiya, the center of supreme consciousness. And again, if that sounds reasonable, if that sounds probably true or probably reasonable, then take it on as your own. If you're not absolutely certain of that, say, well, this seems to me to be right, so I'm going to live from this perspective. That both sides, both approaches can lead one to Turiya, and now I'm going to run the experiment and find out if it's true. But for now, it appears to me that they both are valid, so I'm going to operate from that basis. Only the student of Vedanta understands the necessity of complete voluntary withdrawal to develop a concentrated mind free from prejudice. I'm going to add here that it does not mean that we have to say, my label of who I am is I am a Vedantist. That's a potential setup, because one more time we've taken on another identity. When we say I'm a student of Vedanta, it means I'm a student of these principles that are contained within this block of information that is, for convenience sake, called Vedanta. It's about the principles that are important, not loyalty to a system, for example. Now, where was I? Only the student of Vedanta understands the necessity of complete voluntary withdrawal to develop a concentrated mind free from prejudice. No such discipline or requirement has ever been prescribed in other schools of philosophy in either the East or the West. According to this literature, the root cause of all misery is ignorance, which occurs when the ego manifests itself and separates one from the whole. Without totally going beyond the ego, liberation, therefore, is not possible. In order to be aware of the universal consciousness, one has to transcend one's own individuality, for it creates the barrier between one and the universal consciousness. We can practice that, maybe not living in direct experience yet, but we can practice that again by looking and says, do I understand this, and does this sound reasonable to me? Is there really such a thing? Can I see this notion that there is universality, and yet I experience me as an individual within it? Well, of course I experience things like that. But does it sound reasonable to the person called me that this is the truth? And if it sounds reasonable to me, then let me live from that perspective as best I can, and then gradually allow it to get clearer and clearer and clearer. All personal discoveries and knowledge are transpersonalized when the individual consciousness is expanded into universal consciousness. It means that I, as a me, have personal discoveries, and you, as a you, have personal discoveries, and you have knowledge, and I have knowledge, but we also learn to take that knowledge and allow it to be seen from a bigger perspective, and that this really is universal. In order to comprehend the meaning of the Upanishads, one must especially train the mind and its modifications, because only a purified mind is able to comprehend the profound, subtle meaning of those scriptures. The first niyama of the 8 rungs outlined in Patanjali Yoga Sutras is saucha, and it has to do, it's the principle of purifying the mind. So there's many ways in which we do that, but we say, okay, sign me up for that. I'm going to purify my mind, and I'm going to purify my body. But another restriction, always a bit late in responding. Writing for me is slower than speaking. In the meantime, I still, right. Yeah, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking, Nellie, or observing, but yes, I guess you're talking about written book. But notice that when you read a book, if you just skim the surface of a book, like you're in a university class where the task is to take an examination at the end of the semester and get an A in the course, more often than not, isn't this true? We learn how to be speed readers, so we can just pick off the highlights so I can pass the examination. Well, that will not give us depth. When we slow down in our reading, I presume that's what you're talking about when you say writing. Writing is slower than speaking. If that's what you mean, what you are still doing is Shravana. You are listening. You are listening to the knowledge coming off the page of the book. And if we don't slow down a little bit and ponder that, then we're not going to get the subtler meaning. So in that spirit, they are one and the same. That's what we're doing here. I understand that it's my voice coming to you in this kind of way, but I'm looking at the book. I'm talking to you, but I'm also just reading the book. So it's coming off of this written word here. I hope that touches on what you were shooting for there, Nellie. In order to comprehend the meaning of the Upanishad, one must especially train the mind in its modifications, because only a purified mind is able to comprehend the profound, subtle meanings of these scriptures. This stuff that we're going into here is very, very subtle. The meaning is subtle. The meaning of the mantras of the Upanishads lies hidden within the varied frequencies of the vibrations of the most subtle sounds that can be experienced at the deepest levels of consciousness. Om Tat Sat. Remember this that we're going through here. This Upanishad is about Om. The grammar school, the grammar used to convey the meanings of these sounds is called Niruktam, that which explains the origin of sounds and their vibrations. The mind of modern man has been trained to look, verify, and judge in the external world, but it has not been trained to look within, to find within, and be aware of the inner dimensions of life. Ponder that. Has your modern world trained you how to look within, verify, and judge within? Did you learn it in your schools? Did you learn it in your families? Did you learn it in your churches if you were exposed to that? Did they teach you how to look within? Or is looking within in our cultures relegated to being only that of psychopathology? I have known many people who went into the field of psychology as a counselor or as a therapist, as a psychologist. They went into it with the sincere wish to help people explore within, and then discover that the only people they can end up seeing as clients are the worst of the pathologically ill. Why? Because the only patient that an insurance company will pay money for is those who are very, very sick, very, very extremely mentally troubled. But I have met many psychologists who went into the field because they sincerely wanted to help people learn how to explore within. And of course, psychologists that I meet are usually ones who have a leaning towards these yogic perspectives. And so they may find a way to do it in a private practice. But anyway, to look, to verify, and judge in the external world, but it has not been trained to look within, find within, and be aware of the inner dimensions of life. Philosophy in the West consists of speculation that uses logic, but Vedanta philosophy is more experiential than speculative, and it is far more advanced than Western scientific, psychological, and philosophical thought. And when I went to study psychology in a master's degree program, the field that I went into was transpersonal psychology, which was basically based on yoga and Vedanta principles. Those who have completely devoted their lives to the philosophical pursuit of truth and who are also thoroughly acquainted with the modern viewpoint can help the contemporary aspirant to study Vedanta. and to study themselves, of course, I will add here. This is the end of this little section. The chapter continues. The next section talks specifically about what the Mandukya Upanishad is. So next time we do this, we'll pick up there where we just left off. I hope this is fun for you. I enjoy it. And so, again, just take it in, and allow some of it to sink in and ponder it. Okay? Thank you for visiting. Thank you for playing. Remember, the topic of this Upanishad is Om. Therefore, Om Tat Sat. Om. There's the Turiya. Om Tat Sat. See you later. Okay? Bye-bye. I'm going to push the button, Roseanne. Is Roseanne and Matri here? I'm pushing the button. Om Tat Sat. Om.